All right, what's up, guys? My name is Fotis Nicolaou, and this is the Calm and Profitable Podcast Show. And today I have with me Jeff Durso. Hey, Jeff, how are you doing, man?
Hey, Fotis, how's it going?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good, man. Thanks for coming here. I think it's gonna be a blast. So, yeah, Jeff is an Inc. 500 serial entrepreneur and startup fanatic who has launched, Jeff, I think it's so far 20 companies on your own,
It's
something
it's
like
about
that.
20, it's about 20 plus or minus, yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. And Jeff is also the host of the Founder Breakthrough podcast, where he goes deep into the minds of the greatest entrepreneurs to discover what makes them tick, what keeps them going, and what makes them win eventually. Plus, from what I recently discovered, he also enjoys trolling idiots on Facebook ads, which is also one of my favorite pastimes. So that was good. Yeah,
I
that's
enjoy it, but I try day by day not to do it as much as possible.
yeah. It's a time sink. It's like the saying that yeah, if you wrestle with a pig, yeah, you will end up like with mud or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, and funny story. So I think beginning of 2022, I
Yeah,
stopped following every news site. And
yeah,
ever since then, it's totally changed my focus. Like I spend so much less time trolling because the news site, sometimes you just can't resist.
yeah.
But if they're
Were
if they're
you
not if they're not even in my feed, then I don't then the urge never strikes me. So
yeah? Were you just you were you active? Like were you commenting? Like what was like? How did it look like?
yeah, so I would comment or reply, or you just get stuck in these debates, these foolish debates. I mean, it's the design of social media to do this, right? Because if you think of like, and it's funny, everything kind of comes downstream of like, I've learned about direct response marketing about 20 years ago, right? I remember that there's probably Dan Kennedy or someone like that who was telling me about polarity, like in all the stuff I was reading, that polarity is how you create action in marketing, right? And now when you look at social media has effectively figured this out for the way you drive ad dollars and push the CPMs up as high as possible is creating polarity. And that's why everyone's Facebook feed is this big, massive troll fest because everything's about trying to get a reaction. And so I think I got to a point where, yeah, as fun as it is, I have better things to focus my time on than being part of the polarity game.
Yeah, I feel you, man. Like I don't know if I've shared this story in the past, but I was like a pretty I would say like notorious troll when I was like very active in the Greek fitness community. And it was like a very, I'm gonna say this, it was like very, the allure was like very big because you got like a lot of attention and sometimes the attention was very good. But after a while, at the end of the day, you felt like really tired and it was like you had been eating
Exactly.
like junk food all day long. And then you're like, man, I mean, do I really want to continue doing this? So yeah, I also stopped.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like a junk flow or a junk energy level.
Yeah.
And I remember I was going through Quasi Joe here, his program, and some excellent videos. And one of them had this diagram. I don't remember everything on it, but it sort of had a list of like the energetic levels of different emotions, right? So going from like completely depressed or completely apathetic all the way up towards like highly engaged. So when you're sort of in this in a trolling match, there's a certain low to medium energy level that you can really engage at, and it can sort of keep you going. But if you're able to avoid that and go higher, right? So it sort of goes higher up to like love is sort of like a much higher energy level, or like so if you get your mindset, if you have your mindset in that low level and you engage it, you're going to burn away a lot of potential. Whereas if you can instead get your energy, your mindset in this realm of possibility. I mean, I know it sounds kind of woo-woo, but it's like the higher you can tune your mindset and then focus your energy there, you're going to get a lot more done.
Yeah, I hear you. Like, I mean, it's just like basic where you invest like your energy. Like, it's not
Mm.
like, okay, I'm gonna invest 1 hour, let's say, trolling people, and that's that. No, it's gonna have some after effects. So it's
Yeah.
gonna affect what happens like okay, later in the day, like your mood, especially if you're like a creator, like I am. yeah, I mean, it's really gonna affect your content, the energy behind your content, and those things. Yeah, I mean, people can tell whether like, okay, you were in a positive headspace or were you in a negative headspace. So yeah,
Exactly.
definitely. Yeah.
So what's nice is it creates a massive life hack for anyone out there is stop trolling. I mean, like so for me, like when I like stopped doing it, it just my whole world just became I just became a much happier, more optimistic, more like, it just put me in a much better mind space. And when your mind space is better, your productivity in all sorts of ways is better, right? So I think about one of my favorite books still that I haven't mastered after 30 years, but I keep trying, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So I'm still working on habit one, but I remember habit 7 was one of the most profound ones for me. It's about sharpening the saw, right? And there's some famous quote. I think they tie it to Abraham Lincoln, like everything else on the internet, but I don't know if it was him, but it said that, if you told me that I had like 10 hours to chop trees and an axe, I would spend 9 hours sharpening the axe, right? And I always thought that was really interesting because your energy level is like that, sharpening the axe. The way you go through everything is like, where is your mindset, or where is your energy level on?
Yeah, I think that's very important. And I think that people have said that, okay, Abraham Lincoln didn't actually say that quote, but yeah, it's very good. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. So usually the format when I have a guest is going through some of your life stories and then trying to extract some lessons from them for the listeners. You told me that you have like a lot of stories available, but I mean, one of my favorite ones, and maybe you wanna start with this, is your approach to luck, and specifically like, okay, how some founders or entrepreneurs can stack the odds on their favor when they're trying to do anything. I think my favorite example was when you used, I think the name of the site was Destination Wedding, and how you
Yeah.
actually went about, okay, finding the leads, the methods that you used, and the entire approach. So do you want to start
Yeah.
off with this? But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so sort of high level, so what I'm sort of fascinated by luck now as a mechanism, because not luck as something you don't have control of, but luck as something that someone in the last year used the word luck surface area. You want to maximize your luck surface area. And the reason that luck is such an important thing is because of this concept of asymmetric upside, right? So the idea being that if you normally, if you and I place a bet for $5, I can I can lose $5, I can win $5. So that's symmetric upside and downside risk, right? But if I invest in a startup, right? So that $5 could turn into $5,000, or like say take, Peter Thiel, when he invested in Facebook, he put $500,000 in. And I think he sold it too soon and only got a couple $1 billion out of that investment. I mean,
Poor
that's
Peter.
massive
Yeah.
upside, right? So he said that was one of his biggest regrets, right? Is that he sold it too soon. But the point is that, so when you observe venture capitalists, and these guys are shrewd, right? They're some of the smartest, hardest working in a sense in terms of the way they do due diligence. Super shrewd, but still only expect, say, 1 out of 10 investments to drive their portfolio returns, because they expect that 100x or 1000x hit to make up for a lot of total misses, and that's literally by design. So that's sort of what I looked at and said, okay, so how does this apply to everything? And so if I kind of look backwards, so this was long before I realized that luck was the governor. But when I was running destinationweddings.com, so this was what I learned about split testing, right? And so, the concept of split testing, right? A/B testing. So back then, it wasn't people weren't really talking about, this was like 2004. People weren't really talking about it except in the, internet direct response space, where everyone was talking about it. It was like the big thing. In fact, they had already moved on to Taguchi style multivariate testing. But I was like, all right, well, let's start with A/B testing and see how that goes. And so we would run test after test after test, and a lot of times we would get a dead heat, meaning we would run A and B A would be 53. And so what we do, we'd run a test and see how many people gave us a $50 deposit. That was sort of the first entry point into becoming a client of ours. And so test A might get 53 deposits and test B would get 53 deposits. And we would say, okay, what that told us is that whatever we tested didn't work. Or in some cases, we would do test A would get 53 and that's the control, and test B might get 30. And so we're like, okay, well, that's a complete failure, which is fine. That learned something. So at one point we did like, I think it was 8 dead heats in a row, where everything we tested wasn't working. And then at some point, my wife asked me if I had tried the stress angle. And so I said, I think we have, but I'm not sure we've done it directly. And so I ran a test, and we had been pretty well optimized at this point. So where our headline on our homepage was pretty well optimized. And the only thing we did on this test was added the word stress-free to the headline. And so literally the original headline was something along the lines of finally the way to, ensure you have a great wedding. I don't remember all the words, but it was well optimized. Yeah. Right. So it's finally, something. And then the test was finally the stress-free, everything else the same. That was the only change in the headline. And the test case beat the control by 43%. I mean, absolutely blew it out of the water. And this is interesting because we had a pretty, like I said, it was pretty well optimized. Like we've been testing for months, and we'd already been doing, pretty well. We had already had the business was pretty dialed in. But if we hadn't just those words stress-free. So once we took that and then bubbled it up the funnel, so it changed all of our Google AdWords was driving the business. So we would put stress-free into the front end and then really weave stress, the whole concept of stress-free into everything else throughout the site. Overall, I think we ended up getting like a 10x improvement by pushing that discovery out over everything. And so I would say that is, now you can say, looking back on it, okay, I can see why those words would be so powerful, but the level of power is kind of ridiculous. And that's an asymmetric upside moment, right? So we did a test and it just exploded because of those 2 words. And I think those are the 2 words I think that put us on the Inc. 500.
Nice. Insane, huh? Yeah, very good, very good. I also like what you said at the beginning about venture capitalists, that okay, they're gonna make 10 investments and they will be happy if like one knocks it off the water or something like that. And it reminds me what like one of the biggest direct response companies in the world, Agora, but it's like their own principle is that we're gonna run a bunch of different campaigns, we're gonna write a bunch of different sales letters, we're gonna try a bunch of different offers, and we will be excited if we have 1 out of 10 winners. So I mean, and for the people who aren't like aware about Agora, like they're like the #1 direct response company in the world. They have like the best copywriters, the best people to buy traffic, some of the best creators, and they're happy if they have like a 1 out of 10 because they know that this 1 out of 10 wins, it's gonna make all the other 9 losses completely worth it because the results are gonna be ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think in the realm of copywriting, if you're not running these kind of tests, you're committing like a mortal sin. Because if you look at a venture capitalist, right, what I was talking about before is they're writing checks. So when I say a venture capitalist is placing 10 bets, that means those are 10 checks for 50,000, 500,000, $1 million each, right? So they're losing money on each of those bets that doesn't work. Like they're losing real money, right? And then hoping that the one that succeeds really succeeds. So it took me about 8 seconds to put the word stress-free into our headline. If you look at whatever my typing speed is and divide it out by what it takes to type stress-free. So I mean, you talk about Agora. Obviously, they're paying the best copywriters in the world, so it's not free to do those tests. But compared to investing in a startup, it's certainly a lot cheaper. So testing copy, testing ideas, testing stories, you really need to do that because there's so many ways to find something new that just blows you up. And even if you're doing well, right? Even if things feel like they're optimized, like I said, like if we never discovered stress-free, we would have built a great business. I mean, the business was already doing pretty well, but it sent us to another level by finding stress free, because what that did was find the hot button that our target market said, yeah, that these people get me. And
Mhm.
so this is why I think that testing for copywriters is just a must.
Yeah, I felt you. Yeah. We mentioned copywriters, but I think I'm not sure, but I believe that you also have founders, okay, with their startups. So my question would be, how do you usually advise a founder to use like your concept of luck to their advantage?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, do you have like any stories that you can share about this?
Yeah, I think this is a real challenging one that I'm actually in the process of grappling with now, because I think what you have here is so, and the genesis of this was kind of looking at it used to annoy me whenever like I'd see all these founders bragging about how, hey, we just raised $3 million. And I'd kind of cringe because it'd be like, that's like they're bragging as if they won the lottery, but really what they won is like a 1 in 10 chance or something, right? So to me, like the real work begins, and the serious founders do this, right? So they'd obviously put the press release about the funding, but they'd say the serious work begins at that point. This is not the that's not the victory, right? That's the starting
Yeah.
gun.
Mhm.
So kind of seeing this, it kind of made me realize that you've got a misalignment between venture capitalists and founders, because to a VC, you're just one of my bets, right? So the way this plays out, for instance, is that a VC, they'll look at failure as a totally acceptable option for you, or a grand slam as a totally acceptable option. A pretty good return is not an acceptable option. So I've heard stories of like founders that tried to sell their company for what could have been like a generational wealth for them, and their VCs would push them not to do it because it wasn't a big enough hit for the VCs. So I kind of looked at this and said, geez, there's a real challenge for founders, because VCs get to play this asymmetric luck game, but how can founders do the same thing? And that's what I mean by I've been grappling with it. The problem is that there's another principle that kind of goes against this, which is you need to focus or you can't possibly succeed, right? So, and I'm not saying that I have the killer answer to this problem. I'm saying that you have to understand both of these principles as a founder, that if you don't, if you just split everything into 10 equal bets, there's no way you could possibly succeed. So to me, bets are like sequential things that you test. You try to, they're like you at bat. So you get the bet so it's in really good shape, and then you test it and then see what happens, and then double down or drop it and then move on. But you need to be able to you need to figure out how to maximize the number of bets that you're placing as a startup, but while paradoxically not completely losing focus, right? Not doing bets across a million different things. So you've got to figure out how to balance that focus, like I'm in a focus domain that I'm trying to solve, while also being able to place bets. And when I say a well-formed bet, the two mistakes that you can make on a bet is if it's not, and okay, so think of the term minimum viable product to frame this.
Yeah.
If your MVP isn't minimum, if it's not viable, then you're going to conclude when you run that test, oh, people don't want this. Okay, well, maybe they don't want something that doesn't work at all.
Yeah, of
So
course.
maybe the bet wasn't formed enough to really test it, because what you learned is that you're below a threshold of quality that people will accept.
Okay.
So the other extreme you can make is like a way gold plated bet, right? So you could have done it for 2 weeks of time, but you spent 2 years of time on it, and you didn't learn any more out of that 2 years. Like you had already passed the threshold of like this thing being a good enough bet.
Mhm.
So when people think about MVP, and I think people say the word MVP so much, I don't even think people think back to like minimum and viable. They don't really think carefully about what those terms mean.
Yeah.
You've got to make your bets properly formed so that you're really testing what the underlying thing is. And you've got to do it in a way that doesn't waste a lot of resources. That's what gives you the chance as a founder to get more bets placed and have a better chance of hitting that luck.
Gotcha.
So
And I think, yeah, I mean, I like what you said about focus, and it reminded me like another story from your destination wedding. that also like plays into luck, where I think you were trying to generate leads and you tried like 4 different options. One was online wedding magazines. Another one was
Yeah.
like a Google ads. I don't remember. Do you remember
Yeah.
the exact details? Maybe you want to share this.
Oh,
Because I think
I painfully remember all of it.
it's
Because like, so what happens is we hit, so the first thing we tried was online wedding magazines, because we're like, well, obviously this is our, like, we're selling a wedding service and this is wedding targeted magazine. So we literally bought like banner ads. This was right before Google AdWords was taking off. So we bought banner ads and it was just like throwing money into a wood chipper. Total waste of money. Then the next thing we tried was we actually went to a couple bridal shows, because like, again, brides, like that's like we're literally going to what looks like our target market. And what happened was we'd have like a DJ on one side of us and like, you know, some other wedding, you know, like maybe a florist on the other side of us, just getting lead after lead after lead all day long. And we were just sitting there like idiots. And no one, the only comment, some brides would come by and be like, oh, I wish I had thought of doing that. But like we were at a point where like they had already chosen their wedding, like they had figured everything out. So they weren't having a destination wedding. I think this is really important to understand, that your niche is like, our niche wasn't weddings, it was destination weddings. That's different. And that's where we started to realize that. And then, but again, of course, we made the same mistake when we got on Google. The keyword wedding, I could get clicks for like 9 cents a piece. And I was like, wow, we're rich, right? Just like scale it up. None of those clicks converted into anything. Like it was just totally useless. The word destination wedding blew up, like for obvious reasons, right? It was our category, beach wedding, like things like that, were such a difference in terms of what came out of it, that I think that for us, like take the word, I think wedding is a perfect example of, I call it like fool's gold, right? Like we ran an ad under the word wedding, we got tons of clicks cheap. So we're like, great, right? So it's like this, I think this happens to anyone. Like they suddenly get a ton of traffic through a source, but if that traffic is useless, then that's not, that's not going to do anything for you. You have to dial it for the whole thing. So what happens, like for us, we would analyze all the way down to like, how much was this wedding worth for us at the end of the day? And different keywords are performed differently. And click cost wasn't, what looked like the front end metrics wasn't always what played out to be the back end metrics. So in other words, there are some keywords we'd have that might create, so our intern metric was cost per deposit. So $50 deposit, how much did we pay in terms of traffic to get that? There were some keywords that would get deposits for like $20 a piece. We pay $20 and get a $50 deposit. There's some keywords that get deposits for like $80 a piece. And then when we compared in the end analysis, so if we just spend like $80, well, that's, we're losing money. We can't do that. And looking at the end analysis, those $80 deposits would produce like 3 or 4 times as much revenue at the end of the cycle. That's why you kind of have to take a holistic view towards how you're optimizing the stuff, because there's a lot of false signal as you're going. And I guess now if I translate this to a lot of founders, the false signal for them is you tell someone your idea and you're like, wow, that's really cool. Okay, well, what does that mean, right? What does that mean? That's really cool.
Yeah.
Because I think people get, this false sense of like, oh wow, that's cool. Like that's not a real test.
Yeah.
You've got to figure out that's not a real test. That's not a real bet.
Yeah. Just like stating the idea. So yeah, that's not like a good test. Yeah.
And by the way, if people tell you that's a terrible idea, also that's not signal. Actually, for destination wedding, it took me a year before I started it, because I took a lot of feedback from people like, that doesn't sound like a good idea. You could do better. I believe that, like, I could do better. And I don't know what at some point there was some signal that my co-founder kept throwing at me. Like there's some signal that changed my mind. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go all in on this and see what happens. And boom. Okay. It was worth doing. But so you can't take positive or negative feedback unless it's properly formed into a bet that's really testing something. You really have to know what you're testing, or you can get, you can get the wrong idea, and you can either kill something that would have been great. I almost walked away from that a million times before we started it. or
Yeah.
you can spend years going down a path that's not going to work out.
That's good. That's good. Since we also mentioned, okay, knowing when take a step back and stop and when to continue, like what are some questions that people can ask when they place those type of bets that, yeah, will guide their decisions? So whether, okay, we keep moving forward, oh, or okay, this is a complete disaster, let's stop. Like, okay, not, I mean,
Yeah.
how would you like consult them on this?
Yeah, so I really like the product market fit frameworks that have evolved, and it's funny because I've sort of instinctively been moving towards this, and then at the beginning of this year, I read an article by the founder of Superhuman about how the company Superhuman found product market fit, and what was really exciting to me is that it took this mysterious thing and put a real methodology on it. And I believe so they had adapted it. I think his name is Sean Ellis, had come up with the framework maybe 10 years ago. So if you go back further than that, Mark Andreessen sort of defined it as like, if you have product market fit, it's like everything's like a tailwind to your business. Everything you do works easier. If you don't have product market fit, it's like this massive headwind, or it's like, Sisyphus trying to push the rock up the hill. And I've certainly experienced that. With destination weddings, we kind of had product market fit very early, even though I didn't know what it was. So I kind of took it for granted, right, in later ventures where we kind of had this tailwind pushing on us. In other businesses I've had, we've certainly had headwinds. What I love about the Superhuman article is he broke it down into, their approach was, do you send out a survey to your customers? And the basic question you ask is, if we were to disappear, would you be very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed? It's a very interesting way of asking. Yeah. And so then what they do next is the percent that say very disappointed, that's your product market fit or your PMF score, right? So for Superhuman, I think they said it was in the low 20s, maybe 24% at first, right? The metric you're targeting is about 40%. If that number gets to 40%, you're roughly in product market fit. And obviously you can do better or worse, right? What was interesting is that what they would do next is, okay, so then the question, okay, what do you do, right? And so the next question is, okay, what do you like most about the product? And maybe the third question is like, what should we change? You can take the people who said very disappointed if you disappear. So these are your core users. You take what they say as the core feature and you bubble that into like, these are the core features that our users like, that our target audience likes. That's the core. So for Superhuman, I think it was speed was like the biggest. They did a word cloud, and the word speed was right, this massive word in the middle.
Okay, yeah, that's
okay. Everyone's mentioning speed, so that's our thing, is speed that people like. Then what you do, obviously, whatever they say they want to make better, well, they're your target audience. You can put that into your requirements to make it better. And that you take the people that said they wouldn't care if they don't care if you disappear. You throw their feedback. Their feedback's kind of useless, right?
Yeah.
Then the question is, what do you do about the people in the middle? That's what gets really interesting. People say somewhat disappointed. You split those into two groups. The subsection of them that mention the same core feature as your core audience, you take their requirements seriously, because they're kind of saying, hey, it's almost great if you just tweak this one thing. That means they're kind of telling you, hey, I'm almost in that core product audience of you, but it would be helpful if you had a mobile app, or it'd be helpful if you had this, right?
Yeah.
The part of that audience that mentioned a different core feature than what your power users mentioned,
yeah,
you throw it out.
Okay. Yes.
So this is what was interesting to me. So what that's doing is, if you tranche your users or break them up into different groups, you've got these core users, right, who are like your best users, and you're trying to slowly expand that methodically. And that's what that framework do. I strongly recommend people look up that article. I think if you look up Google Superhuman product market fit, it'll come up. And so I think for them, like, they grinded that PMF score from like low 20s to like 50, low 50s. And they said everything blew up for them when they did that. Like, everything just exploded.
I'm always like fascinated with surveys, because if you do them right, like you can get like so much market intelligence. While I was listening to you explain the survey, and okay, you mentioned the people who would be like very disappointed, my first thought was, oh, if it was me, I would probably reach out to those people, interview them, and find out, yo, I mean, okay, what are you guys doing? Like, okay, what's like the demographic? Okay, how old are you? Like, can I see like a bias in the profession? How did
Yeah.
you hear? Yeah, I mean, I would try and reverse engineer how those power users got to us. And I would ask myself, okay, how can I find more of those? While, of course,
Yeah.
taking into consideration what you said. And yeah, I mean, yeah, surveys are like so powerful, man. Like if you do them right.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. So I think you bring up an interesting nuance here. Is like you're trying to create lookalike audiences for the power.
Yeah.
Like so there's the one thing is like because product market fit. Well, okay, so I can evolve the product. That's what we talked about, the requirements, right? But
Yeah.
you can also evolve the market to your point.
Yeah.
Like who am I
Exactly.
focusing on? Where am I targeting? Which channels am I using? And what are their demographics? What are their psychographics? Like what do these people think? So I really love that approach of trying to get into their minds.
Yeah.
So for destination weddings, for us, one of the massive breakthroughs we had was we did an ask survey. And this was like, I call it Ask 1.0. This was before Ryan Levesque, who's popular right now, or famous for doing like the Ask method. This was before he was doing this. There
Yeah.
was a guy named Alex Mandossian that had pioneered the space. And his whole thing with the Ask survey was like one question. And so we sent out a survey just saying, what's your single biggest concern about your destination wedding, your upcoming destination wedding, right? And got like hundreds of responses, and then wrote a sales letter on our site. So so the way our flow worked was that the homepage, the first call to action was a lead magnet. It was like get a free wedding website and a report, right? When you answered that, it took you to a page that was like a 3,500 word sales letter. Which what was awesome about this in the wedding space, our competitors thought that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
They're like, this thing, picture the market, right? So every one of our competitors had these like beautiful pictures, and everything was like BS platitudes about, oh, it's going to be the
Yeah.
loveliest day of your life, right?
Yeah. 20 words of copy, and that's all, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. You come to our site, and it's like your wedding is going to be an unmitigated disaster. We had this like 3,500 word thing about here's everything that can go wrong, but here's how we solve it to make sure it's going to be incredible. And then the very bottom of it was like a credit card form to give us $50, right? Now, so we took the survey, wrote the sales letter based on what came out of the survey, and those deposits just started like flooding in because people are like, wow, it's like I didn't realize I didn't realize how complex this could be, and I'm stressed about it, and I want to make sure I got to get these guys to handle it for me because they're going to take care of all these different scenarios that I hadn't even thought of. And that all came from that survey. And by the way, a lot of what came out of the survey was counterintuitive to us. Like the number one thing that came out, we thought it would have been like, oh, I want to get the best deal for us. We thought it would be couple centric. Nobody cared about themselves. They cared about their guests. Everything was about, I want to make sure my guests have this. That's the survey, like overwhelmingly showed that. We were a bunch of guys trying to build a wedding company. We would not have figured that out on our own if we hadn't done the survey.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. It's fun that you mentioned that, okay, your competitors were doing like something completely different. There's like this, Dan Kennedy, who's like, okay, this very well-known marketer, and one of his like favorite principles in business is defy industry norms. So wherever you enter an industry, okay, take a look around. What is like, okay, 90% of your competitors are doing, and do the complete opposite. And almost always, you will do much better than them, because his point is that if we're looking at most of your competitors, they're gonna be average. And if you want to be average, sure, you can copy them. But if you don't want to be average and you want to like make more money than them, okay, or dominate the marketplace, you should do something that's like very different than what they're already doing.
Yeah, and that is ridiculously fun in practice to do that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So for instance, like charging $50 for someone to talk to a travel agent was absurd at that point. Absolutely crazy, right? Like at that point, you could walk into any travel agency and they'd immediately drop everything to talk to you about your wedding and start helping you plan it, right? And what we said is, you got to pay us $50 for us to prove that it's worth our time to talk to you. That's
That's
the
very good.
interesting
Yeah,
mindset shift, right? And
of course.
but that right there changed our business. The approach to right using direct response sales letter. Looking at our website looked like an infomercial at the time.
Yeah.
Like people would be like, "This is cheesy," and that was fantastic because we flew under the radar screen until we got under the Inc. 500. No one saw us coming because they're like, "Well, these guys aren't. These guys, this is ridiculous. These guys can't be doing any business." Right.
Yeah,
And we were just quietly killing it because kind of to your point, doing the Dan Kennedy approach of, you
yeah.
know, everything different than our competitors.
Mm. And also like you asking for $50 like deposit, yeah, this made sure that you would attract like a higher quality prospect. I'm not sure if you refunded the deposit in case you couldn't help them, but still like the quality would be like completely different. Like I'm not sure if you guys noticed this, like, or what your
Oh,
experiences
we
were, but
noticed. So, yeah, I know. I think this brings up a great point. So, everything's part of a system, right? So it's not just as simple as the prospects. If you think of how that flowed through the business in both directions. So before we had the deposit, we were recruiting, independent travel agents to take the leads that we were generating. Because before we had the deposit, we were generating tons and tons and tons of leads. $2 a piece. We got a fully filled out you know, lead that was
yeah,
quality, like someone who was potentially having a destination wedding. And so we'd go to these travel agents and we'd give them leads, right? And they'd be all excited, like, wow, you're giving me so many leads, until we talked to them a couple days later and they would be screaming at us. So like those people stink, they're tire kickers. They don't care,
yeah,
like they're just pumping me for information and disappearing. So we're like, okay. When we put the deposit in place and we told we guaranteed it. So we said, if you want your money back, no questions asked, we give you the $50 back, right? But just by charging that deposit, and we started telling our independent agents, okay, this lead that we're giving you has paid us $50 for the privilege of speaking with you.
yeah.
They changed the dynamic. Now
Mhm.
suddenly there were, our benchmark over time became over 40% of those would actually become clients.
Yeah,
I mean, can you imagine like someone saying, I'm going to generate leads for you, and 40% plus of those are going to become actual clients? All you
yeah,
have
that's
to do is
insane.
do a good job. Like,
Yeah,
so, so what it did was it totally changed the dynamic. And because of that, the quality of agent we could get shot through the roof.
yeah,
But what I mean, so this is why it's really important that you can't just look in the vacuum of, well, obviously just directly the $50 deposit made it so we could market better. We could turn our marketing budget up as high as we wanted because the cash came back immediately. There are a lot of local benefits of that deposit for us, but the global benefits were a lot bigger in terms of how they flowed through other parts of the business. We could not have had the high quality agents that we did without that deposit, because we would have just been
yeah.
churning them, or we would have had to put our own staff in place to qualify and figure out who's good and who's not. It would have been much more expensive and it wouldn't have had the same effect as that. So individual decisions you make can have repercussions throughout the entire business. I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys were like from what I understand, is that you were like very open to feedback, not like from your prospects, but you also like cared about like the travel agents that you were working with. And yeah, you asked them like, I mean, what's up? How's it going with those leads? Like, it's not like you hid behind your computer screen and you hope things would get better.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you were open to feedback. That's why you guys improved. That's like something very good as well. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because everything's about, by treating them with respect, because that's effectively what that was, is treating them with
Yeah,
respect, right? They built our business for us.
exactly. Yeah, cool. So when you guys figured that, okay, you figured out how to drive quality leads with YouTube ads after you changed throughout the funnel, you changed like the funnel, and then you also added the deposit. Like, okay, what happened next? Like, did you have like a steady growth, or did you face like other challenges, along the way?
Yeah, so it was sort of like any engineering problem is like each time we solved a problem, it would create a bottleneck somewhere else in the system, which was fine. So like some of the other bottlenecks we had to solve, the first bottleneck we had to solve for was crickets, right? No one was, we weren't getting anything at all. And that's where I kind of freaked out because I'd spent, an enormous amount of my own money and time building this business, flipped the switch and no one was showing up. I was like, okay. That's when I discovered the direct response marketing was the way of the world, right? So I discovered like Perry Marshall when he was just getting started. And I bought a course of his that had nothing to do with anything, but it came with like 3 certificates to talk to him for half an hour.
Nice. Yeah.
And
That's
just took, so he and I spoke for like maybe an hour and a half. And every idea he gave me just turned into gold because he was, way down the rabbit hole. And then that introduced me to Dan Kennedy. Like I was sort of, that's where I sort of became realizing that like, people will say what their superpower is. Like my superpower is like, I'm a goat hunter. Like when I met Perry, I was like, all right, this is a goat. He must hang out with other goats. Where are the other goats? And I just became obsessed with finding every goat. So like I think I spent like $20,000 in 2004 buying every program I could to like go really deep, like, all Dan Kennedy's stuff, like all of like, Alex Mandossian, like all these guys that were getting big, Perry Marshall, of course. So that's what got the marketing thing. So changing that, boom, like the marketing thing happened. And then writing the sales letter, which intuitively I was like, this is ridiculous that I'm writing like felt like a get rich quick sales letter on a wedding website, but let's do it. The goats are telling me try this, and tried it and it worked. So then that created flow. Then that got the agents excited because now they're getting quality leads. The next challenge we had was they were booking couples, but then the couples would love them. The way a destination you work with the bride and the groom. I mean, the bride, right? Figure it out, and then you book the bride and groom. Then the goal is to get the guests to book through you. What would happen a lot of the times is our agent would get the couple to book through them, and then the guest would go and use like Expedia or Travelocity or something.
All right.
And so 80% of the revenue just leaked out of this wedding. So all of the work was in the bride and the groom, or the bride. All of the revenue came in the guests.
Yeah.
And so that created that bottleneck in terms of how do we fix this problem? Because this would be a catastrophic problem, not just for us, but for these agents too. That's terrible to do all that work and not get the benefit from it. So what we did is we had the benefit of, I think it's called the Bannister effect, right? So the concept of the Bannister effect, right? So before Roger Bannister, it was certain that you couldn't run a 4-minute mile. For Europeans, that's 1.6 kilometers or something like that. You couldn't do that in under 4 minutes. It's impossible. That someone had written an article in like Modern Science proving that you couldn't do it because of the physics of the human body, right? Then at one point, Roger Bannister did it in 3:59.53, like something like literally within like a couple tenths of a second short of 4 minutes. Within a month, like 5 or 10 other people did it. So the reason I bring that up, so we had 150 travel agents. We could plot a distribution and we could call BS on any metric that someone had. So for instance, the metric of what percentage of deposits, when I give you a deposit, does that convert or not, right? Our best agent was consistently doing 43%. A lot of agents were doing 10%, 15%, 20%. So when someone who was doing 20% said, well, I can't do any more because of lead quality, we could say that's BS because we know that 43% is the number. Now, if someone said you can't do 60%, okay, there's probably something. If I have 200 samples and the best is doing 43%, that's probably, I'll take that as that's good. That's pretty good. That's like maybe you can do better than that, but that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And so we focused on helping figure out how do we move the people who are doing 30% to the 40% mark? How do we get rid of the people who are doing 10%? So that's what we learned from there. Then the same metric could apply to, okay, revenue per wedding or revenue per deposit, right? And we could do that same metric. What are these agents? Because some agents just naturally didn't have the problem that I mentioned before, right? The problem
Yeah.
of like some agents, like when they got the bride, they just instinctively, the bride was like their best buddy and made sure that they went to the guests, and like you don't go through Expedia, right? You're going
All
through
right. Yeah.
us, or they made the right
Mhm.
deal. So just some agents just instinctively knew how to do that. So what we could do is figure out, okay, what are they doing? Like the
Mhm.
Roger Bannisters of that metric. So it's like every metric has like a Roger Bannister is the way to think about it.
Mhm.
And we were blessed because we had 150 of these agents. We could plot every metric against like what's possible for this
Yeah.
metric, right? If I give someone like, so, you know, the agent that was doing 43%, we'd given her like 100 deposits. So she's probably 43%, right? You can't say there's luck involved at that point.
Of course.
That's,
Yeah.
and for any of those other metrics, the same thing applies. So realizing that if you don't do that, you can really miss out. Like, so if we hadn't had, just say we only had a handful of agents and our distribution like capped out at like 25% instead of 43%, we wouldn't have known any better. We would have assumed 25% is the speed limit. Whereas
Yeah.
really the speed limit was closer to like 40, 43% or whatever.
Yeah.
And same kind of goes back to like what I'd said before about the, our split testing and putting the word stress free in there. We
Yeah.
wouldn't have known any better if we hadn't tested that,
Of course.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. So you discovered that there's like an outlier in the travel agents. What did you guys do? Like looking at, if I look at what happens today in some sales organizations, I would guess that maybe you would record their pits and
Yeah.
try to reverse engineer what they were doing. Maybe you would focus on the tonality of the voice, and you would try and teach the other guys and gals in your organization how to do this. But how do you guys fix this when you were working with independent agents? What did you do?
Yeah. So if it was 2023, I'd try to do everything you just said, right? Those are all
Yeah, of
modern
course.
type
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
right? Even call recording wasn't really a thing that was done when we were doing this. So
Yeah,
what we did do was realize that there are different explanations at different parts of the bell curve, right? So there's sort of like the elite, the top 10 and the top 20, and then kind of the next, bunch, kind of the next, say, 20 or 30. And what we realized is that the opportunity, the lever was in helping that second batch become up their
first
game
one.
based on learning from the top batch. So the lever was not, okay, we take the lowest batch and
Of
get them to
course
be
not. Yeah, yeah. You don't want them. Yeah,
taking people who are not good at this and making them good. Like
not
life's
gonna
too
work.
short, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But taking people who are very good to excellent, that's a lot of fun. And it's not just fun for us. So we would recruit the agents to help us with that. The top guys, like we would recognize them and interview them and ask them for ideas. Like, what are you doing? Like, what do you do here? What do you do that? So just making them realize that they were the best of the best and that we
Mhm.
appreciated their input, that we're literally asking them for advice on how to train, the next tranche. And then, we would create like, communities so they would get to know each other. Right. So years later, now there's like an annual summit that they all go to and they get to meet each other and hang out and have awards and stuff like that. So just letting them realize that like if you're the best of the best, it's really great for you to have the opportunity to train the next tranche to go over that line.
Yeah, that's very smart. And for me, what like it's very interesting is that I'm not sure if you guys were thinking about this back then, but you realized that you weren't just like a wedding business. You were also in the uh travel agent education business. So you
Yeah.
kind of like became open to this idea that look, if we want to really make this business grow, we cannot just focus on traffic and sending people to the agents. If our bottleneck is that we have some leads and some agents that okay, they don't convert those leads as much as we would like, we should actually focus on the education of the people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was like
Yeah.
for me.
And recruitment.
Yeah.
And recruitment, right? I think is a really important point, right? Because recruitment is becoming attractive to the best of the best can shortcut a lot of education work.
Yeah.
So obviously both of these are important things to do, but by making our program attractive, by getting a reputation,
Mhm.
right? By making this, by becoming exciting. So like by writing, we talked about the copy that we created to attract brides. Well, we're creating copy to attract agents too.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so we're surveying them to figure out what are they frustrated about.
Mhm.
And if you think what the brides are frustrated about was pretty deep. I mean, the agents went pretty damn raw. Like this was a profession that had just been just decimated, by like, the Expedias of the world or the Travelocities of the world. Like the basic lore is that your profession doesn't exist anymore. What you know is totally useless. So
Yeah.
imagine if the entire world is telling them that you're totally useless, nobody needs you anymore. And we came to them and we're like, what you have is freaking amazing to us. You've got 20 years of, or 30 years or whatever, all this like really important expertise. You are absolutely critical to making our product a ridiculous success. It was like throwing water in a desert, right? And
Mhm.
again, so that was us speaking to them and connecting to them, saying, okay, you're going to be valued super highly with us.
Mhm.
And that wasn't us because we weren't making that up. That was just the nature of our business that, say, Destination Wedding required their expertise. You can't go on Expedia and have it automatically figure this stuff out. You
Mhm.
need an expert in the middle.
Mhm.
So conveying to them that like this is where you need to go because you're going to be put up on a pedestal. Your
Yeah.
expertise is going to be valued. The world has been, just treating you like garbage for the past 10 years as the internet's been taking over everything. And now
Yeah.
we're going to give you a customer that treats you like the way you were meant to be treated.
Yeah, yeah, this sounds amazing because even like today, I mean, one of the biggest issues that a lot of salespeople have is like I don't want to deal with crappy leads. I don't want to deal with
Yeah.
people who are tire kickers, who have like
Yeah.
no clue what they're doing here. Yeah, I mean, they want like a quality leads. And I think it was like Kennedy who said that the number one way to actually destroy like a good salesperson is not with it's not like with volume of like sales calls. It's with like crappy leads that okay, they lead nowhere because
Yeah.
those people, yeah, I mean, they're for them closing someone is fun, is what keeps them like interested in whatever it is they're doing. And if they're gonna talk with 10 people a day and close like nobody, yeah, it's like they feel empty at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very nice. That's very nice. So yeah, man, that's very cool. Do you have like any other cool story about like a problem you solved with destination weddings?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would flip it around and say that how about a problem that it created for me that I then didn't
Yeah,
solve and
that's
that
good.
that put
Yeah.
me sent me back to the drawing board is how I would put it. Because the the problem with destination weddings was that I got product market fit for free. And so
Yeah.
it created a massive blind spot for me, is what I would say. And to go back even further, my first company, which was a consulting company, we built software for massive financial institutions, right? Every piece of software that I wrote in the 90s would become a multi-million dollar product within like weeks or months of launch.
All
So
right.
in my mind, I thought if I program something, it makes millions of dollars. I didn't realize that our client had this amazing marketing powerhouse ready to go. So as soon as we gave them the website, they could flip a switch and suddenly everyone in Wall Street was buying this thing like crazy because they knew how to market it and sell it, right? So that's why
Yeah.
destination weddings, that blind spot when I went into destination weddings was marketing. I thought marketing was easier. You get it for free or it's just this thing. So I had to
Yeah.
learn marketing. The
Mhm.
blind spot that I left destination weddings with was product market fit. I
Mhm.
assumed that when you build a startup and you put all in, you commit to it, you go all in on it, that
Yeah.
you're going to get that tailwind for free. And after that, I started some businesses that didn't have product market fit, and it's freaking painful, right? Because some of those businesses I worked just as hard as I did for destination weddings, and they didn't quite make it. They didn't quite get over it, and it wasn't like the failure thing either, right? Because remember we talked about VCs like the failure or success is a good outcome. These are like in that zombie land where I built businesses that kind of got going and
Yeah, that's
kind of had
bad.
like thousands or tens of thousands of users, but
Yeah.
they were kind of like just barely not viral. So it's like if we pushed, they would go, but if you stop pushing, they would grind to a halt.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like when you don't have product market fit. And that's why now I'm really focused on that as a really important metric, that you need to dive in and try to figure that out, because it's magic when you have it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned is about the companies, especially like just being at just barely not viral, because
Yeah.
yeah, that's something similar with a lot of offers in the direct response space. So essentially you're gonna have a success, you're gonna have a complete disaster, or you're gonna have something that's a bit in the middle. And everyone who's been in the game for years tells you that the worst thing that you can have is something that's in the middle.
In
Because
the
a
middle.
success, it's great. Yeah, I mean, you can just scale this to the moon. If it's a disaster, you just scrap it and you move forward.
Exactly.
But if it's like in the middle, you're like, I mean, what was the problem? Was like, okay, the traffic source, the offer, the headline, the lead? Yeah, you're not sure. And a lot of people would try to fix this, and they will end up spending a lot of time, energy, and money and resources, and it will just not be the, the great hit that they expect. So yeah, that's also
Yeah,
true.
I would say that it's definitely the biggest nightmare that venture capitalists, that investors have. Like they don't lose any sleep over their failed investments. Or they obviously don't lose sleep over the ones that hit it. They lose
Yeah,
sleep over the zombies, the ones that
yeah.
are just in the middle, that just become these like money pits. And I think the same should be true for founders. Like that's my experience over starting a lot of companies now, is that that's where the most amount of money is wasted, is in the ones that almost succeed. And so I think that you need to get more methodical about it. And that's why I was really excited about the superhuman case study with product market fit, is that there's potentially a more methodical way to figure out, should I keep going or should I stop, right? So if you look in their example, right, their original PMF score was in the low 20s,
Yeah.
right? So they could have shut that business down thinking like, well, this is grindy, this is almost viral. But they found a way to find more of the core users and make the experience better, to expand that core to get to PMF. So PMF, in the case of destination weddings, like it was like, imagine if you like were an oil rig builder and you walked in the desert and built a rig and oil came like gushed out of it. You'd be like, oh, that's how it works, right? That's literally what that felt like. That was just killer product market fit. Um, I think there are cases where you're not quite tuned into perfect product market fit, but it's worth dialing to see if you can get there. That's what you have to figure out, is to be methodical about it, because years can go. If you're not methodical about it, you can either give up too soon or you can waste years without making any progress. That's what I like about measuring, having some metric of PMF that you can manage to and say, okay, you know, what is our number? Are we at that 40?
Mhm.
Are we below, or what?
Yeah, makes sense. I'm not sure, like, if you obviously you talk with more founders than I do, but how open would you say people are to like those ideas? Like, okay, do you find that they are kind of stuck in their ways and they hope things will improve, or are they open to some tough love from a guy like you who's been like in the game for years? Like, what's been like your experience like?
I think a lot of people have been in that first category where, I mean, I've talked to people who've spent years without getting feedback. Like,
Hmm.
and actually, these are some people, founders who aren't even following like lean or like MVP principles. They just know it's a great idea, so they just go after it. And then at the point that, I connect with them, they're like totally frustrated with the world because they know they're sitting on this killer idea, but they can't get other people excited about it. They're constantly getting this feedback back, like, and it's just frustrating to them. It's like, I could try louder, I speak slower. Why don't you get my killer idea? And
Hmm.
so that's a echo chamber of one. That's a very dangerous spot to be in as a founder. And so I would say that sadly, a lot of founders are in that spot. Now, the second thing you said, like we said, is, okay, or are they open to some tough love? A lot of times they are, because they've now already wasted years or burned through
Yeah.
tons of resources. So when I talk to them, I try to be respectful. And by the way, I'm speaking from experience. right?
exactly.
Because when I say those blind spots I had, those cost me, I could probably say millions of dollars. This isn't like these aren't like small lessons, right? The
Yeah,
product market fit is a very expensive lesson that I learned the hard way. And so it really saddens me to see all of these founders that are sitting on these like I think like entrepreneurism is the engine of the world. It's the most important thing out there. When someone says, I'm going to go do something on my own and create something, that's the most magical experience in the world. And so for that thing to turn into wreckage is a shame in my mind. I hate to see that snuffed out,
yeah,
but you've got to face this truth. You've got to be, there's a discipline you have to have, or you can lose your opportunity. And you might have had an opportunity to change the world and you could miss out on that. That to me is like something that, I really want to help founders not get into that trap or to get out of
mhm,
that trap once they're in that trap. Because again, the last thing I'd say is you're never out of opportunity, right? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So there's been people who've been in a pretty serious pile of wreckage who've pulled out of it. So it's not about you missed your opportunity. There's always a new opportunity, but don't just needlessly churn it, I
yeah.
guess is what I would say.
Yeah, it's like always funny because you hear like a lot of stories from people who persisted, like okay, years, decades, whatever, and eventually they succeeded. But I'm always like reading those stories, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe you would have been successful much earlier if you were open to
Yeah.
some external feedback, or if you took all this energy and all those skills that you created and you, yeah, channeled them some somewhere else because yeah, it's really a shame to waste like so much time and energy. And yeah,
Exactly. And it's worse than that too. So there's massive survivor bias on that too.
exactly.
Right. So
Yeah,
their story is that they happened to go all this down the path and then it worked out. Or like it's popular right now. Everyone says burn the boats, right? And this is based, I believe, on the story of Cortez, right? Who
yeah, where she burned them.
ordered
Yeah,
his men to literally burn the boats because he realized they're outnumbered. So the only way that he had a chance was to force his men to fight to the death, right? Why do we hear the story of Cortez? Because it has survivor bias built into it, right?
exactly. Yeah,
So if there might be maybe Smith told his men to burn the boats and we never heard about him again. So I think
exactly.
it's like
Yeah,
it's really important that you take all this advice with a grain of salt. And again, this is why I say these are competing principles because the nice thing about burn the boats is it creates a level of focus and energy that's like unparalleled. So yes, that's important, but
yeah,
also understand these other principles at play too.
yeah, yeah. That's more. That's more. Now I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but I would love to know what you are working like nowadays. What keeps you excited? So if we have time, I would also like love to hear more about those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I probably have about another 15 minutes or so.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm, doing a combination of, working in B2B SaaS company. So I'm working with a company, Smart Track right now, which is
Mhm.
we're launching a SaaS product in the B2B space, which is that's a lot of fun to me, right? Because it's like working on all this stuff. So I'm actually working on the product. So I get to do technical stuff because I've been
Okay.
programming all my life. And so I still love to get really dirty in the technical aspects of things and not just marketing, even though
Mhm.
marketing is, another love of mine. So those are probably my two favorite things in the world is marketing and programming. So I'm going deep on Smart Track, and I'm also helping advise founders out there who are trying to figure out, people who are stuck. So I'm kind of
Mhm.
out there giving people advice, helping them, get to the next level.
Okay, that's interesting. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit more about the advising. Like, how does it work like nowadays? Do you want to explain like what's the concept? Like, okay, do you have like packages? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty informal right now and it's pretty casual.
Hmm.
So
All right.
yeah, I just help. It's like on a per per founder basis. So I haven't boiled it down into offers or anything like that.
Okay.
Right now, it's just I just know people who are looking for advice, and I'll just usually informally advise them.
Okay, that's cool. So based on the people that you have advised so far, what would you say is like the biggest blind spot they have in their startups?
So I think that really the first, well, so okay, I think there's a few of them, right? So one comes down to, I'd call it an energetic thing.
All right.
And so when I've surveyed a lot of founders, the number one thing that they'll come back to is they say, they just need money. They just need funding to move forward.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But you still there?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Hold on, I think my internet burped for a bit, but I think it's back.
Okay, that's good. That's cool. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So yeah, I can. So one of the probably the biggest thing that comes up is people keep saying, I need money, I need a co-founder, I need something.
Yeah.
And what I usually advise them is get the word need. Never use the word need again, because need, you can't attract. The word need is not a very attractive word. And so, we've talked about sharpening the saw. Need is like the most unsharp saw you could possibly have if you're out there trying to get people. So you need to, no, I'm saying need. You'd want to attract people to you. So you've got to create that energy of like, how do I become like a magnet where people want to become a part of this? And part of that is showing momentum, showing energy, right? So if you have an idea and it sounds like a great idea, and 6 months later I talk to you and it's the same idea, but you haven't made any progress on it, that's not a very attractive energy. So everything kind of comes down to like momentum and like starting with that why, okay, why are you doing this? What's drawing you? But then actually making progress towards that, and then telling the story to others that you're trying to get involved, customers, co-founders, investors, that makes them want to bet on you and your idea. So that to me is like, I see a lot of people get stuck in wheel spinning. They like their startup never gets off the launch pad, right? Because they're not actually taking action to it, because it's scary to take action, because this beautiful idea suddenly hits the real world, it gets ugly. So that can be scary. And then people can waste a lot of time not even taking the first step of moving it forward. So you've got to take that action, and then you've got to figure out how to put that into your mindset so that creates that momentum as you move forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, makes sense. And just to reiterate a little bit, I was actually inspired after listening to your Lack podcast. I think it's like the fourth that you created, or the fifth, something like that. And I was like, yo, man, I mean, if I want to make something work, I need to take like a lot of action, and I need to take imperfect action fast. So while keeping what you said about Lack in mind, I was kind of struggling to come up with a plan to attract like podcast guests for my podcast. And I'm like, okay, I have Facebook. Okay, what else can I try? So I came up with 5 different ideas, and I just started the same day taking action with like one of them. And just 2 days later, I already have some response. So a person who I have never talked in the past, they agreed to come on the podcast, all because I had the idea. And immediately, I tried to take action, because I think it's problem, especially with some highly intelligent people. We tend to overanalyze things before we actually move. We worry about 1,000 different things that are going to happen. But in my experience, and you can share your experience as well, as long as you take action, you're good. You will figure things out along the way, and the problems that you predicted will show up will never show up. Something else completely different will end up happening.
Yeah, I think so. I saw a matrix that I think Sahil Bloom put it out last year on Twitter that really connected with me. So the matrix was in one dimension was whether you ask the right questions. So it's kind of the big thinker kind of stuff. And the other dimension was whether you have a bias for action, right? And so what he said was, if you just ask big questions, but you don't have a bias for action, it's like this analysis paralysis mode. You never do anything. You're just a thinker, right? On the other hand, if you just take action, but you never ask questions, you're a grinder. So you're never gonna break through and do anything big. If you do both, magic happens. And he said that's like the change the world quadrant. And a funny story for me, like, because you had said about just taking action and like, because that's what I've always had to like push myself to have the action bias, right? So the thinking stuff comes for free with me. And I have to get the action bias for me. And so at one point I was like walking on the beach a while back and I was listening to a podcast and I was loving the interview. There's another startup podcast and I really liked the guest. I'm like, this is really cool. Like, I'd love to have that guy on my show, right? But I was like, all right, let's do an experiment. So I stopped walking, paused the podcast, pulled up LinkedIn, right? Sent a connection request, kept walking. 20 minutes later, when I was walking, I looked back. He had accepted my connection request.
Nice.
So I sent a message from the phone. Because at first I was like, oh yeah, I'll do this. At some point I'm going to make a note to do this.
In the
like,
future, yeah.
I'm like, okay, let's just do it right now. So I connected with him. Boom, he connected. Then I sent him a message. Hey, loved the episode you had. Loved how you said this. Here's how it connects to my audience. We would love to go deeper on you. Any interest in being on my podcast, right? Before I left that beach walk, he had agreed and already scheduled the show.
Nice.
And I was like, this harkens back to like when Amazon invented one-click buying, right? Hey, I want that product. Click. Okay, I got that product. And so for me, it was like, I want that podcast guest on my show. Click. Okay, he's on my show.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like kind of what you said about like, testing a channel and boom, getting feedback right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where that action bias comes in.
Yeah.
Your bets can't succeed if you don't place them.
Of course. Yeah. And I also love how this connects back to what we said at the beginning about having as many bets as possible. So yeah, you can see what works and what doesn't, and it can help you keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think optimizing as many well-formed bets is sort of the way I think about it, right? So they have to be well-formed, or you can't just shotgun bets all over the place, or they will all fail.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. All right, Jeff, like I love this interview, man. So yeah, if people want to know more about you or reach out to you, like, okay, what's the best way to connect with you?
Definitely on LinkedIn is the best way to find me.
All right,
that's cool. And I think it's a linkedin.com/in or whatever, and then /Jeff Durso. We'll pull up my profile.
I'm gonna include
always.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah. No, always love to talk to founders and hear what they're doing, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, man. That's great. And also, like, okay, I will also mention again, like your podcast, which I personally really dig it, which is like the Founders Breakthrough. So for anyone interested, yeah, I mean, definitely check it out. I think you have like a podcast every month, a podcast episode.
Yeah, it varies. So, yeah, it's
varies,
I was doing every week. It's gotten in the past few months, I've kind of slowed down for the summer, so it's been every month, but I'm going to be ramping back up to every week soon.
Cool.
So
that's cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. All right, man. So thanks a lot for being here, Jeff. And yeah, hopefully we'll chat again sometime soon again.
Awesome. All right. Hey, yeah, this was a blast.
Yeah, man. Thanks. So I'm gonna.
All right. Yep.